A federal judge vanished overnight, gone without a trace, after being hit with a bombshell $800 million lawsuit from Karoline Leavitt. Corruption, cover-ups, and international escape? This isn't fiction, it's real. And it could shake the entire U.S. justice system to its core. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. That's not the plot of a political thriller or some fictional crime. Drama. That's real. That happened. A sitting federal judge, an individual sworn to uphold the Constitution, someone trusted with life-altering decisions, has reportedly fled the country, vanished into thin air. And the reason? It all points back to a fast-tracked, high-stakes, and absolutely explosive lawsuit. An $800 million legal bombshell filed by Karoline Leavitt. Now let that sink in. A judge, gone. Just like that. And it wasn't because of some vague threat or obscure scandal. No, this came right after the lawsuit, and more importantly, the process was sped up under unusual circumstances. Almost like someone wanted it wrapped up before too many secrets got out. So let's unpack this insanity. This story has all the ingredients of a high-voltage Washington scandal. A rising conservative political firebrand, an $800 million lawsuit that names powerful figures, claims of media manipulation, judicial bias, and deep corruption, and now, a judge who has quite literally left the country, and the deeper you dig, the more tangled the web becomes. Let's start with Karoline Leavitt. If the name sounds familiar, it's because she's been making waves for a while now. Former White House staffer under President Trump, she's been on the fast track as one of the boldest voices on the right. Unafraid to challenge the status quo, Leavitt built a brand around calling out what she says is deep-rooted government corruption. But nothing she's done before even comes close to this. When she filed the $800 million lawsuit just a few months ago, it was dismissed by critics as political theater. But the court filings told a very different story. Leavitt's team brought forward mountains of evidence, encrypted emails, leaked internal memos, affidavits from insiders who claimed they were pressured to target her reputation and halt her political momentum. And here's where it gets even more jaw-dropping. Some of those accused in the lawsuit weren't just media execs or anonymous bureaucrats. There were whispers that sitting judges and federal officials may have been involved. One of those judges? Judge Nathaniel Burke, a respected name in legal circles, known for his no-nonsense approach in the courtroom. Up until this case, there was no public controversy surrounding him. But once the lawsuit started to move quickly, and make no mistake, it was fast-tracked in a way that baffled legal experts. Judge Burke's behavior reportedly started to change. Sources inside the courthouse claimed he became paranoid, evasive, and increasingly private. Several hearings were closed to the public. Certain filings were suddenly sealed without clear explanation. And then came the strangest part. He began pushing back against the speed he initially allowed. It's like someone hit the panic button. Was he protecting something? Or someone? Karoline Leavitt, meanwhile, doubled down. She told reporters, "I didn't file this case to play games. I filed it because the American people deserve the truth." And then came the turning point. Her legal team filed a motion to have Judge Burke removed from the case, citing conflict of interest. The motion included financial records, public disclosures that appeared to connect Burke to one of the corporate entities named in the suit. That filing was made public late on a Thursday afternoon. By Friday morning, Judge Burke was gone. Let me repeat that. Gone. He didn't show up to court. He didn't file a leave request. His chambers were silent. And by Saturday, reporters had uncovered flight logs indicating he boarded a last-minute private flight from D.C. to Zurich, Switzerland. Swiss authorities haven't confirmed anything. The DOJ has gone radio silent. But according to anonymous insiders, the situation is no longer just a legal battle. It's turned into an active federal investigation. This is no longer just about a judge. It's about how deep this really goes. Why would a federal judge, someone with lifetime job security and enormous prestige, risk it all to vanish without a trace? What did he know? What was he trying to avoid? Or, here's the chilling part, was he running for his life? Karoline Leavitt. hasn't backed down. In a fiery press conference, she said, "When the truth becomes dangerous, that's when you know you're getting close to something that matters. The American people deserve honesty, transparency, and accountability. This isn't about me. This is about exposing the systems that protect the powerful and punish the bold. The public is now watching with wide eyes, because if even a judge can run when the pressure is on, what does that say about the system?" And that brings us to this very moment. As of now, no one knows exactly where Judge Burke is. Swiss authorities are tight-lipped. Interpol may be involved. Legal analysts are predicting this could be the start of a historic unraveling of courtroom corruption. We're just at the beginning of this storm, and trust me when I say everything is about to change. It all began with one bold move, Karoline Leavitt filing an $800 million lawsuit that would ripple across America's political and legal landscape. To understand the gravity of what happened next, you need to know who Karoline Leavitt is. Leavitt isn't your typical political figure. She's young, fearless, and fiercely vocal. As a former White House staffer under President Donald Trump, she built her reputation as a no-nonsense advocate for conservative values, transparency in government, and rooting out what she calls the deep rot inside Washington. She was already making headlines, appearing on national news, rallying at high-profile events, and attracting grassroots support. But when she filed this lawsuit, everything escalated. $800 million. That number turned heads immediately. It wasn't just the size, it was what it represented. According to the legal documents, Leavitt accused top media executives, political operatives, and even members of the judiciary of launching a coordinated campaign to ruin her reputation. The charges? Defamation, obstruction of political process, and abuse of power. At first, some skeptics brushed it off. They said it was political theater, an attention-grabbing stunt. But those opinions began to shift as details from the case emerged, and what came out was nothing short of explosive. The evidence that made people panic, within days of the lawsuit being filed, journalists and legal analysts began pouring over the court submissions. This wasn't just a pile of accusations. It included serious evidence, private emails that suggested intentional efforts to leak false stories to media outlets, encrypted chat logs showing coordination between individuals to neutralize Leavitt's influence, whistleblower testimonies, some anonymous, others verified, claiming that Leavitt was being specifically targeted due to her investigations into government spending and classified document leaks. This wasn't a single rogue actor trying to damage a political opponent. If the documents are to be believed, this was a multi-tiered takedown campaign involving individuals across media, politics, and even the court system itself. One whistleblower stated she was getting too close to things that weren't supposed to come out. The plan was to discredit her, derail her momentum, and scare others into silence. And what shocked many wasn't just the fact that these actions may have occurred. It was the level of collaboration between supposedly independent institutions. It painted a picture of a system working together to suppress a political threat, all behind the scenes. A case that moved too fast? Now here's where things got weird. Leavitt and her legal team, armed with damning evidence, demanded the case be expedited, claiming that delay would give those involved more time to cover their tracks or intimidate witnesses. And surprisingly, the court agreed. The lawsuit moved fast, unusually fast. Legal experts were puzzled. In high-profile cases, especially involving multiple high-ranking individuals, delays, motions, and legal maneuvering often slow things to a crawl. But in this case, hearing dates were set quickly. Subpoenas were issued almost immediately. The judge, Nathaniel Burke, signed off on procedural motions that would normally take weeks in just a few days. Was it efficiency? Or was something else going on? Some legal observers believed Judge Burke was trying to push the case forward aggressively to show transparency. But others felt there was something off. Why such haste in a case so politically sensitive? Why would a federal judge, normally cautious in politically charged lawsuits, be in such a rush? That's when cracks started to show. Court insiders leaked reports of growing tension in Judge Burke's chambers. Staff described him as increasingly distracted and unusually private. Several decisions he made were sealed from the public without proper explanation, including rulings that limited media access to the hearings. Suddenly, this speed began to look less like efficiency and more like controlled urgency. As if someone, maybe even the judge, wanted to fast forward through a minefield before anyone realized they were standing on one. And then, it all exploded. The motion that changed. Everything Leavitt's team wasn't about to let it slide. They had picked up on the inconsistencies, the sealed rulings, the rapid timelines, the sudden disappearance of certain files from the public court database. That's when they dropped the bomb, a formal motion to have Judge Burke removed from the case. And this motion wasn't based on speculation. It was backed by receipts. The filing included financial disclosure records from the judge, legally required statements about income and investments. In them, Leavitt's team uncovered a quiet financial connection between Judge Burke and one of the very media conglomerates named in the lawsuit. Not direct payments, but mutual board affiliations and indirect holdings that could raise conflict of interest concerns. The motion was filed on a Thursday afternoon, and by Friday morning, Judge Burke didn't show up for court. He didn't call in, didn't email, didn't even send a representative, just like that. He was gone. What started as a bold legal strike from a political firebrand had now turned into a full-blown judicial crisis. Judge Nathaniel Burke wasn't just any judge. He was a name that carried weight in federal legal circles, known for his straight-laced demeanor, strict adherence to the law, and an almost textbook approach to courtroom conduct. For years, he built a reputation as a man who did things by the book. But even the most polished masks can eventually slip. When the $800 million lawsuit filed by Karoline Leavitt landed on his desk, it seemed like just another high-profile case in a long career. But this case, this one had teeth. And from the moment Judge Burke took it on, things started to unravel. Not just in court, but in his own behavior. At first it was subtle. A postponed hearing here, a delayed decision there. The kind of thing that could easily be chalked up to scheduling conflicts or procedural kinks. But as documents started to surface, and the lawsuit began dragging big names from politics, media, and the judiciary into the spotlight, Judge Burke's courtroom began to feel less like a temple of law and more like a ticking time bomb. From composure to chaos, insiders close to the court began to speak up, off the record, of course. One staff member described a shift in the judge's tone. He was rattled. You could tell something was weighing on him. He wasn't himself. According to multiple sources, Burke started pushing back hearings without explanation. In some cases, he gave parties mere hours to respond to legal motions, an unusual and arguably unfair practice for a federal case of this size. More troubling were his inconsistent rulings. Legal analysts reviewing court transcripts noted several procedural decisions that simply didn't add up. One day, he'd fast-track an evidence hearing. The next, he'd delay it indefinitely. Even experienced lawyers in the room were reportedly baffled. And then came the most alarming move, sealing parts of the case from the public. This was the moment that raised the biggest red flags. Courtrooms, especially in cases involving public figures and potentially criminal misconduct, are expected to operate with transparency. But Judge Burke began issuing orders that closed off access to certain hearings, restricted press attendance, and locked away filings that would normally be public record. Suddenly, the legal system looked like it was hiding something. And the pressure mounted. Journalists dig in and find. Too much with Burke's behavior growing increasingly suspicious, investigative journalists began digging. And what they found turned the already tense atmosphere into full-blown chaos. Financial records, publicly available but rarely scrutinized, began to reveal a disturbing pattern. Judge Burke had disclosed a portfolio of investments in a blind trust. Nothing illegal on the surface, until a closer look revealed that one of the entities connected to that trust had direct ties to a media conglomerate named in Leavitt's lawsuit. In plain terms, the judge assigned to rule on a case involving media corruption had financial links to one of the accused corporations. That wasn't all. Further investigation uncovered emails and meeting logs that suggested Judge Burke had, in recent years, participated in closed-door policy events and legal panels funded by one of the corporate donors now under legal scrutiny. While not outright illegal, it was enough to suggest a potential conflict of interest, and in the eyes of legal experts, it reeks of bias. That's when Karoline Leavitt's legal team made their move. The emergency motion that blew it open in a stunning legal maneuver. Leavitt's attorneys filed an emergency motion for judicial recusal, citing both the newly uncovered financial disclosures and Burke's increasingly erratic behavior as grounds for his immediate removal from the case. The filing was direct, forceful, and scathing. It accused Judge Burke of compromised impartiality and stated that his continued presence on the case represents a threat to public confidence in the integrity of the judiciary. And here's where the story takes a truly shocking turn. Instead of recusing himself, instead of issuing a statement, instead of denying the allegations or calling a hearing to defend his position, Judge Nathaniel Burke vanished. The vanishing act no one saw coming. The day after the emergency motion was filed, Judge Burke was scheduled to appear in court. He didn't show up. His staff said they hadn't heard from him. His phone went unanswered. His chambers were locked. By that afternoon, reporters began sniffing around, and that's when the first major clue came out: travel records showing Burke had booked a last-minute international flight. The destination? Zurich, Switzerland. A one-way ticket. No security detail, no press announcement, no resignation letter. Just gone. The next 24 hours were pure chaos. The DOJ declined to comment. The court released a vague statement saying Judge Burke was unavailable. Meanwhile, news broke that federal investigators were now reviewing all recent decisions made by Burke in connection to the case. Some say he fled to avoid prosecution. Others believe he may have been threatened or coerced. And a few whisper about something even darker: that he knew secrets so big, the only way to protect himself was to disappear. One thing is certain: a sitting federal judge vanishing in the middle of a politically charged lawsuit is unprecedented in modern American history. And for Karoline Leavitt and her legal team, this was confirmation of what they had claimed all along. The system wasn't just flawed, it was rigged. The legal world was still reeling from Karoline Leavitt's bombshell lawsuit when something even more shocking happened. Judge Nathaniel Burke vanished. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a delay. It was a full-on disappearance. A federal judge gone without a trace. And the timing couldn't have been more suspicious. The day after Leavitt's legal team filed a formal emergency motion for Judge Burke's recusal, citing financial conflicts of interest and questionable conduct, the courtroom was packed with media, attorneys, and observers expecting a showdown. But Burke never showed. At first, there was confusion. His staff offered no explanation. His courtroom was locked. No statements, no emails. Just an eerie silence from a man who, hours earlier, had been at the center of one of the most politically explosive lawsuits in recent memory. And then the rumors started. Clues of a quick escape. By nightfall, journalists began piecing things together. A leaked report revealed that Judge Burke's government-issued phone had been powered off, unusual for any federal official, let alone a sitting judge in the middle of a nationally watched case. But that wasn't all. According to two separate sources, Burke had booked a last-minute, one-way international flight to Zurich, Switzerland. The booking was made just hours after the emergency recusal motion had been filed. And this wasn't a pre-planned vacation. The booking time, the disappearance from court, the silence from his office, It all pointed to something far more serious, a calculated escape. By the next morning, the media frenzy had erupted. Legal analysts were stunned, politicians were demanding answers, and behind closed doors, federal agencies were already mobilizing. The DOJ moves in, but quietly. Within 48 hours of Burke's disappearance, federal alerts were quietly issued. Not full-blown arrest warrants, but watch notices. Internal memos began circulating through international law enforcement networks, flagging Burke as a person of interest in an ongoing corruption investigation. The Department of Justice, when asked directly, gave only a terse response. "We do not comment on ongoing investigations." But insiders confirmed to multiple major news outlets that Burke was now officially under investigation by the DOJ's Public Integrity Section, the same division responsible for rooting out corruption among government officials, and that revelation sent shockwaves through the justice system. Because if a sitting federal judge was fleeing the country to avoid an investigation tied to an $800 million political lawsuit, it meant one thing: something enormous was being covered up. The theories swirl: guilt, threats, or a bigger conspiracy. In the hours and days that followed, speculation exploded. Was Burke guilty of something? The financial disclosures tied to Leavitt's lawsuit certainly raised red flags, suggesting a potential conflict of interest with one of the corporations named in the case. But some experts wondered, if he was truly corrupt, why not fight it out in court? Why not challenge the motion and defend his reputation? Federal judges don't just walk away from their careers. They don't vanish without cause, unless something or someone made him. That led to the second theory: threats. Could Judge Burke have been under pressure, threatened into silence, silenced into running? After all, the lawsuit wasn't just about corporate wrongdoing. It pointed to a web of media manipulation, political interference, and possible judicial compromise. If Burke had knowledge of deeper, darker truths, he may have realized that exposure wasn't just a career ender, but a life changer. And then there was the third theory, perhaps the most disturbing. What if Burke fled because he knew something even bigger was about to break? Something not yet made public, something not just about him, but about the entire system. Whatever the truth, his disappearance has triggered a reckoning inside the justice system. The Federal Judicial Council has already announced an emergency ethics review. Congressional leaders are demanding hearings, and the public wants answers. Karoline Leavitt. No one is above the law. While Washington spun into damage control, Karoline Leavitt was not backing down. In a fiery press conference that made headlines across the country, Leavitt addressed the media directly. Standing firm behind a podium emblazoned with the American flag, she said, "Let me be absolutely clear. This lawsuit was never about me. It's about the American people. It's about exposing how powerful institutions have been used to silence, smear, and intimidate anyone who dares to challenge them." She continued, "What we are witnessing is not just the collapse of a case. It's the unveiling of a much deeper rot. A federal judge has fled the country. Think about that. What does that tell you? What are they so afraid of?" And her message was loud and clear. The American people deserve honesty. They deserve transparency. They deserve accountability, and we will not stop until they get it. No one is above the law. Her words struck a chord. Supporters rallied, critics were forced to reconsider, and a growing number of Americans began asking a simple but terrifying question. If a federal judge can disappear under the weight of one lawsuit, how deep does this go? With Judge Nathaniel Burke now effectively a fugitive, his name scrubbed from the courthouse directory and his office permanently closed, the system has had no choice but to respond, and respond fast. In an unprecedented move, the federal judiciary acted within days to appoint a new judge to oversee the $800 million lawsuit brought by Karoline Leavitt. This time, the court didn't just go with seniority, they brought in Judge Marianne Keller, a legal force known for her transparency, no-nonsense attitude, and history of tackling high-stakes political cases, and from the moment she took over, everything changed. Speed like never before. Legal observers have been stunned by the pace. In just the first week under Judge Keller's oversight, hearings were scheduled and held without delay. Discovery deadlines were advanced, redacted court documents were unsealed and made available to the public. It's the kind of legal momentum most plaintiffs can only dream of. According to one legal analyst, this is moving at lightning speed, especially for a federal case involving such massive players. It's almost like the court is trying to make up for lost time, or make a point. That point is being made loud and clear. The judiciary is under the microscope. And business as usual is over. The legal community is now bracing for what could become a landmark case, one that might change how federal judges, media entities, and political operatives are held accountable in cases of defamation, abuse of power, and behind-the-scenes influence. But Karoline Leavitt's team isn't stopping at just one courtroom. Calling for a nationwide investigation fresh off their momentum in court, Leavitt's attorneys, backed by a growing coalition of legal scholars, former whistleblowers, and elected officials, are now demanding something much bigger, a nationwide investigation into judicial misconduct. In a bold and sweeping motion filed to the Department of Justice's Office of the Inspector General, Leavitt's team outlined a chilling pattern: conflicts of interest buried in obscure financial disclosures, secret communications between judges and private political consultants, unexplained case delays, and sealed rulings that favored connected elites. Their argument: Judge Burke wasn't an isolated case. He was a symptom of a much deeper issue within the American justice system. A growing number of judges who may be compromised, pressured, or worse, actively participating in suppressing truth and silencing political outsiders. At a recent press event, Leavitt stated, "This is not about revenge. It's about repair. If the judiciary is broken, if even one judge can be bought, influenced, or silenced, then the entire legal system is at risk. We must clean house, not later. Now." Where in the world is Judge Burke? Meanwhile, the man at the center of the storm remains missing. Judge Burke's current location is unknown. The one-way flight to Zurich has been confirmed by airline records, but since then, there's been no trace. Swiss authorities have refused to disclose whether Burke entered the country or where he might be residing. U.S. Marshals, in coordination with Interpol, are actively pursuing leads. Internal sources suggest they've been monitoring financial activity tied to Burke's known accounts and business connections, hoping to track down where he may be hiding. A former FBI profiler told one outlet, "This is no ordinary disappearance. It's not like he fled to live off the grid. Someone like Burke likely has resources, support, and connections that extend far beyond American borders. And that's where it gets even more troubling. Some sources within the intelligence community believe Burke may be under protection, not by a foreign government, but by influential players who have a vested interest in keeping him silent. If true, it suggests that Burke isn't just running from justice, he's running from exposure. A case that's far from over back in Washington, the lawsuit is moving forward, but the stakes have never been higher. Karoline Leavitt's legal team has expanded its discovery list. New subpoenas are being issued, new whistleblowers are stepping forward, and more emails, documents, and communications, some dating back years, are now entering the public record. At this point, it's no longer just about one lawsuit. It's about a systemic reckoning, and for millions of Americans watching this unfold, it's a moment of awakening. People are asking questions. How many other judges have ties like Burke? How many cases were decided under the influence of unseen power? How much truth has been buried by those sworn to uphold it? This case, while rooted in defamation, has now grown into a battle over the soul of the justice system. And Karoline Leavitt, she's become more than just a plaintiff. She's become a symbol of resistance against institutional corruption, a political outsider demanding accountability in a system that, for too long, protected its own. As for what's next, All eyes are on the courtroom and the world beyond. The lawsuit is expected to go to trial later this year. The witness list is growing, the media coverage is intensifying, and federal investigators are continuing to probe connections that may reach higher than anyone initially expected. And somewhere out there, Judge Burke is watching it all unfold. This is a developing story with massive implications. Was this a cover-up gone wrong? Will Karoline Leavitt's $800 million lawsuit change how the justice system works? And where is Judge Burke hiding? We'll be watching closely. And so should you. Make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next explosive update. This story is just getting started. Stay alert, stay informed, and never underestimate how deep the rabbit hole goes.